Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
What happens when pro-life leaders don't keep the main thing the main thing? Here's a sneak peek behind the scenes.
I was visiting with a manager at a car lot, and he had brought up a perspective, and I think it's a perspective that comes from listening to very matrixed type voices. So it was an extreme view about the hour in which we live, and it had convinced him that, that the world is going to end any day. And so I shared anecdotally with him a couple of moments. One was, I'll never forget, I was on the air in 2001 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we were on the brink of Pakistan and India having a nuclear exchange, which would have probably taken hundreds of millions of people off the face of the earth. It was going to be apocalyptic, and only the grace of God stopped it from happening. I can think of something similar where Hillary should have, maybe the assumption was, won that election, and then where might Barack Obama have gone, and where might she have delivered our sovereignty at a global level? But you see these moments, David, in time where perceivably we are about to go in a direction, and then whether people call it fate, whether people call it luck, or whether people call it God stepping in, he kicks the can. He stops the trajectory. And I think that's kind of taking place in Ohio right now as well, because if, the way that they came upon changing the rules for a supermajority to have an election they thought they could slam dunk through that would have set in motion a Planned Parenthood control as a branch of government, quite frankly, and a human right, something beyond even what I thought was hopeful has stopped it and kicked the can. That's a profound moment.
Well, it's a tremendously awkward moment as well, Michael. And in fact, you're talking about perspective. I was just reading a book by Sam Shoemaker, who's one of the most popular radio programs in the 1940s. And he's a pastor and an interesting leader in many, many ways. Sam Shoemaker was quoting experts of the day from organizations like Human Events and Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and other organizations who were predicting that the rise of the administrative state would end liberty in America within a very brief period of time, maybe 5 to 10 years. This is 1948. They were calling out the rise of the administrative state and the dangers.
This guy got Woodrow Wilson only 80 years before, you did it, which is
square up.
90 before me.
Had it. Yeah. The guy absolutely had it.
Wow.
And it didn't go as fast as he thought. We're still fighting the same conflict today and much closer to the fears that Shoemaker had back in 1948, I might add as well. But the point is that there is mercy in the heavenlies. And I sometimes think it's because of all the people who pray every day and every night for this country that God will have mercy upon us. I think it's also because there are many people in this country who still care a lot.
Yeah.
I went and voted in person. I'm not always have the luxury of being able to vote in person because of the travel schedule that we have. I went and voted in person in the Ohio election. I live, as you know, I live part of the time in Tennessee, part of the time in Florida, part in Ohio because of where our offices are.
More of the time in Florida and Ohio than around me where I can be with you in golf.
Okay, all right. So we don't play enough golf. I get it. But I went in person, and one of the things that I took as a profound blessing was the demeanor and the candor and the joyfulness and service of the poll workers. And I went in. I love going to vote because that's real. That's politics at its most elementary, real level. Now, usually you walk through the leaves if you're voting in Ohio because it's supposed to be in November. But this whole thing about the supermajority thing was a very manipulated process that got a lot of people ticked off. It was not fully disclosed. It was not honest. There was a lot of pieces and parts of this that turned into a warm-up round for a gargantuan battle that's going to be a national battle on a singular focus of a massive abortion amendment that's going to be attempted to be passed in the Ohio Constitution this coming November. So the pro-life community got together and said they basically pulled a fast one. They decided to try to put up a 60% supermajority constitutional amendment, calling it out of nowhere. I mean, in April, the Ohio legislature said, we're doing no more August elections, period. This is stupid. It costs us $20 million and nobody's out there to vote in August. So
boom, pivot, shift.
And then 90 days later, they're doing exactly the opposite of the law they just passed. Now, something about that does not ring true and does not look good on the faces of people who call themselves pro-life leaders. There's just something about it that rang untrue. And the people of Ohio who are not stupid, they've had ballot initiatives within their ability since the Constitutional Amendment of 1912. They hold this stuff very closely in their hands. They're into it. They didn't buy it.
My observation from being a friend of yours and following this from a different state, a lot of people in the pro-life movement bought it. And it left you as a lone voice of reason, kind of isolated. So I say that not to build you up or pat you, but to say, and the people got it even over and above that.
It's weird. It was just
that's like miraculous, weird to me.
If you talk to the pro-life community, they'll say that it was the devil that did it. I mean, that's how committed they were to their fear-driven mentality. Now, one thing we should talk about in that reality is this is not just an isolated case at all in Ohio. This is a manifestation of something that's going on around the nation. Conservatives are where there are ballot access states, and there are 26 states in the union where people have the ability to vote on constitutional amendments. There's a thread of doctrine working its way through conservative money cycles and conservative groups, think tanks, that what conservatives need to now do is to recognize America has become such a scary pagan place that we better start right now moving all constitutional amendment ratification processes to supermajorities. No more simple majorities where the people get to vote on their own state constitutions by simple majority, which is how they all came into being. We got to move it to a supermajority, 60%.
That would be what? Administrative state light, right?
Well, what they're basically doing is saying, because our neighbors have become so desperately corrupt and we're the only decent ones left, we better build a giant wall to make sure that they can't get over it and amend the Constitution. Now that is...
And your problem with that?
Well, number one, it's totally fear-driven. Number two, it's a tremendous insult to my neighbors. And number three, it's the cheapest way out. Instead of saying, if my neighbors are that far from the truth, I have a moral obligation to help them come to the truth. I'm supposed to be the salt. I'm supposed to be the light. I'm not supposed to change the rules because now it doesn't suit my political fancy. I've got more work to do. And the reason that this is so significant, Michael, is the pro-life community's had 50 years to get ready for the fall of Roe versus Wade. The people who were ready the most were the abortion industry. They've mobilized on the offense instantaneously from the leak, from the moment of the Alito decision leak or the Alito opinion leak.
This was their response.
They were mobilizing fast on the offense. The pro-life community was caught toasting champagne to the fall of Roe versus Wade and then saying, gee, wonder what will happen now. Or they were foolishly thinking that the old laws would hold because when Roe fell, then whatever laws they had would drop back. And so they had passed laws that had no impact during Roe, but were still on the books in the event Roe would fall. Well, what they didn't stop to consider was that the same abortion industry that makes millions and millions of dollars and Big Pharma that makes millions and millions of dollars were not going to stand for that for 1 second. So instantly court challenges blocked all of those laws. And now we're in the fight of our life over the question of human life. And so what ended up happening in Ohio was a warm-up round, which cost tens of millions of dollars, created massive confusion, and now we're in the aftermath of that. To be honest with you, we now face in Ohio a vote in November. Most voters are so confused over what just happened. Now they've got like 80 days to figure out what's about to happen and respond. It's not really a smart way to have a conversation that's so serious.
When you subscribe to 1850 Main Street, you're the first to find out what's happening next with new guests, publications, and events. And when you spread the word about 1850 Main Street, you're helping others find real answers to the real questions facing America right now. To learn more, visit 1850mainstreet.com. And please, tell a friend.
So, you being on the battle lines, and you've been dealing with this from day one, we kind of see where Planned Parenthood's agenda is going with this, how unsuspecting most are of understanding it. Where do they go with this victory now?
Well, Michael, there has been so much confusion, and this is one of the things you talked about our organization. I've had the privilege to serve for a lifetime now for the American Policy Roundtable, which is the parent company of the Public Square Media Network. One of the things we have specialized in for 4 decades is the construction, the passage, the defeat of, the litigation that surrounds ballot issues, particularly constitutional language and constitutional amendments. This is what we do, among other things, but this is what we've done, and we've been pretty efficient in this work. So one of the things we know for certain is when you're trying to talk with people about constitutional law and making changes, you don't want to confuse them. You really want to people don't want to be confused. They don't deserve to be confused. The power is in the hands of we the people when it comes to amending the Constitution, and it's the obligation of people in leadership to make this as clear and concise as possible. And I don't care whether it means you feel best at the 4th grade reading level or you're at the postgraduate reading level. You have to make it fair and understandable to everybody because everybody's voice counts. They all get a vote.
Yeah, because my confusion is, how is a Planned Parenthood early victory in Ohio a victory for the Constitution?
And this is the question. What happened was the fight got started by the pro-life people who try to confuse two things that don't match. They try to confuse ballot access and the supermajority approval for an amendment with the pro-life question. Those are two very separate questions. When the pro-life people mixed them together, they began to market the process amendment change as if this is saving babies. Now, that's a very large leap because there's nothing in the amendment that talks about saving babies. And what they're really saying is if we build the wall big enough, we'll be able to save babies this time. It's also the presumption that Planned Parenthood and their allies could never get a 60% supermajority for an abortion rights amendment. That's an assumption. But it was a shortcut, and it was a way to make the barrier 10 points higher for the inevitable amendment that's coming in Ohio in November. Now, this happened in real time, and there was never a question that Planned Parenthood was going to try this move, and everybody had plenty of notice to know they had enough signatures, they were going to make the ballot. But by blending the issues, they created a tremendous amount of confusion, and that strategy failed.
Looking at me, do you see the confusion in my eyes?
Yes, I do.
All right, so I see Planned Parenthood trying to become a branch of government with the human right and blank check for death.
Right.
And here they are in Ohio trying to get their precedent in a state so they don't have to do it anywhere else. And I got to let them win in order to get toward, so how does a constitutional victory become a victory for life? Connect those dots for me.
Let's look at it this way. Let's look at it at a prize fight. It's coming. And the number 1 and number 2 contenders in the field are now vying for the open heavyweight championship. Okay? And the argument is not about let's get in the ring and let's settle this. The argument is how many rounds are we going to fight? It's a tactical procedural. So, it would favor one guy to fight 15 rounds, favor another guy to fight 10. And so now the big fight is, are you going to fight 10 rounds or 15 rounds? 10 rounds or 15? So that's what they did.
You're showing your age.
Yes.
Because that goes back to when heavyweight fights, that was huge in heavyweight fights in the 70s,
right.
Whether you went 12 rounds or 15,
right.
Made all the difference in the world. Who would win?
Right. So we're talking, we'll save it. We'll stop the illustration right there.
Yeah.
Or to be another sense, whether you want to talk about running a lap. All right, you're going to be in track and field. Is this going to be a 440 or 880? What's it going to be? Is it going to be a quarter mile, half mile?
Right.
And so this is where the fight came on to a procedural fight that the pro-life community basically said, if we win this, it's going to be 10 points harder for Planned Parenthood to win their coming fight, which is the real fight. The pro-life community wanted a 15-round fight. Planned Parenthood wanted a 10-round fight. And the voters of Ohio said, we're not changing our Constitution on a 60% supermajority. It'll stay 50%. Now let's move on to the real fight. So this is where they are. So now the real fight is now the real fight. The problem is so much confusion has been created in the aftermath and so much money was spent. We're talking about $30-40 million having been spent on a procedural argument. Now we go to the big fight where there's allegedly $70 million more, and the whole world's watching because in 2023, this is the only abortion rights amendment. Now, the thing about the amendment people have to understand is that we have a project called seethelanguage.com. If anyone wants to understand why this is of national import, you have to look at seethelanguage.com, and you'll see the actual language of the Ohio Amendment and our research team's notes on what that language does mean or could possibly mean in a court of law. This is the largest, longest reproductive rights, but it's not even a reproductive rights amendment. It's called the right to reproductive decisions in the plural. Nobody's ever seen the right of reproductive decisions discussed in American history. So they're creating a whole new genre of rights, and then they're attempting to explain what that means on one page. It's a huge amendment for a constitution, and it's got trapdoors and weasel words and all kinds of stuff that is very poorly thought out. They're trying to throw a fast one now past the Ohio voters. So in the aftermath, the only question now remains is, will all the activity on an August 8th vote create a retained amount of interest for the coming November 7th vote, or will people walk away saying, I already dealt with that. Next item, please? That's the big question.
The amount of money that they spent shows their commitment to this, right? This is the war for them.
If Planned Parenthood,
Planned
Parenthood wins this amendment, it sets up a precedent across the country. No one would have ever passed an amendment that is so radical in regards to giving them rights and privileges and opportunities and shutting other people out, including the legislature, because this is a constitutional right. First off, who makes up a right?
It's supposed to come from
God. Yeah, that's kind of what the Declaration
not
of Independence
government,
says.
and pre-exist.
Yeah, so somebody's taken that position, and that's clearly Planned Parenthood. And now everybody's got to get in line or else. So this is a massive, massive fight. So where pro-lifers think that a 60% supermajority is going to be the wall that saves them from the hordes coming over, that's a real short-sighted strategy. And when it fails, it creates a real aftermath of difficulty. That's not smart.
From my prettier view in Tennessee, it sure looks like the voters of Ohio get and value and treasure the Constitution, for which I thank God for. Do they get and treasure the sacredness of life as much as the Constitution?
Now we've got.
Now I'm holding my breath.
Now we've got to find that question out. We really do, and I would say that anyone that thinks about praying for mercy for the unborn, this would be a real important time to do so.
And then the influence on the presidential election.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is a whole other topic, isn't it?
This is the leverage point for them. Yes. They would love to, Planned Parenthood would love to win this in Ohio and call that the leverage to turn red states blue, and that the abortion issue has a very long tidal wave impact. Since the decision that came out now is over a year old, the tidal wave of response that hit early states with ballot issues is gone. It's nowhere near that passionate. And it will continue to go lower and lower as the years go on, because the question of abortion, while it has a big part in our conversation about life, government, and respect for one another, it is not something that most people are dealing with every day. So it has to be a framed argument and an orchestrated attempt to move a law in this regard. The more that the concern about the change coming at people from Roe versus Wade falling, the more that tidal wave becomes just sort of a stream, the less passion people have about the whole idea.
Yeah, and then how they attach it. I'll give them this. I've been making some observations lately, or I hear a little voice in my soul whispering to me that we don't talk much about actual issues. We like to talk about people or personalities, political celebrities, rather than the issues they stand for. And I think that there might be a bait and switch in that if they can get this victory and this precedent in Ohio, they'll just simply attach that. Pardon me, I know people hate that I use that expression, the matrix, but they'll just attach it to a face, to a side in a matrixed narrative battle.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just puts accelerant on a fire. And that's what we need to look out for. I guess that's the further conversation that we need to have, which is a narrative that we kind of see forming, and how that narrative will really be what people are voting on, more than actual people who we're vetting, who stand for sides and solutions of issues that are vital.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.